You need to know when you've hit it. 99% of the time, the reason a build breaks is because you've gone past that limit without realizing. Always make a backup before testing anything, and I also like to record my tests so that I can watch back the footage to see what has caused the breakage, so I don't have to keep reloading the backup and testing it over and over again. Secret rule number 4 is embrace the frustration and pain. Okay, let's begin with motors, shall we? So if you've only ever built one slime block flying machine before, I would imagine it looks something like this. We've got two sticky pistons facing in opposite directions, and then we've got the observers that are powering them. And I thought it would be worth taking a look at actually why this thing works. Things do get complicated down the line, we just have to start things off with the basics. Now I'm sure a decent number of you know that when you move an observer, it fires a short redstone pulse of 1 redstone tick. And you can see that happening here. Now the cool thing about single redstone tick pulses going into sticky pistons is it causes sticky pistons to actually spit out their block. So in the example of this small flying machine here, if we activate it, you can see we have a loop going on. Our sticky piston is pushing this segment out, which then causes an update through the observer, causing the sticky piston to fire, bringing this segment along, which then updates the observer, causing the sticky piston to fire for a redstone tick, and we get this looping action happening. If you understand this, you understand how all giant machines are made. Let's take a look at this slightly larger motor. It uses exactly the same principles as that motor over there, we just have one extra piston. But the principle is the exact same. When we fire this thing, this first segment is going to be pushed across by 1 block, then this sticky piston is going to grab this segment here and pull it along 1 block, and then this sticky piston is going to pull this segment along by a block, and then the whole loop is going to start all over again. As you can see, it is slightly slower than the flying machine that we originally looked at because there are more stages to the loop, and that's an important detail to remember, but the system is the same. This is how all giant machines work. You're essentially creating a loop of pushes and pulls and then attaching things onto it. Now so far all of our motors have made use of observers to power the pistons, but you can also use redstone blocks on the pushing side of the sequence. Now this is obviously a very large loop with a very large number of steps. This is going to be an incredibly slow flying machine, but you can see the idea is the same. We are creating a loop that just cycles around, gradually pushing and pulling our flying machine along. These pistons push the segments along, which causes the pistons to be powered, pushing the next segment along until it gets to the end, and then we get to the pulling side of the loop, and they all pull each other back, and we get that looping action happening. Now so far all of the motors I've shown have been very linear and very flat, whereas sometimes the loop isn't quite so obvious to see, but the loop is still there, it just looks a little bit more jumbled. This is exactly the same as this. It's just, it's built a little bit different. So there we go, we've covered the motor side of things. Have a go at building a few of them yourselves. Make a big loop, make a jumbled loop, experiment around. Now let's start attaching things to our motors. Now an attachment is just a part of your machine that isn't contributing to the motor. It is not adding to the movement of the machine. It is just tacked onto the motor. You found the motors pretty easy to understand, right? Like you understand how they work. Well, attachments are even easier to understand because they work in exactly the same way. You just don't have to loop them. All you have to do is find a segment of your motor that has budget to be able to add in, say, an observer and a sticky piston, an extra slime block, and then you can use that to drag along your attachment. The same thing goes for a pushing attachment. You just need a little bit of budget to be able to add in a few slime blocks and a regular piston, and then you can have your pushing attachment. Now I must admit this isn't the prettiest slime block flying machine in the world, but you can see how it's all working. We've got our motor here, this is doing all of the heavy lifting, and then these two are just being brought along with it. This is the fundamentals of any large flying machine. Look at this. You recognize that? Does that look familiar to you? All the rest of it is pointless. It's all just attached to this one tiny little loop right here. That little jump ahead to the mega machine brings up a good point. What if your attachment is way bigger than the 12 block push limit? Well, then you add an attachment to your attachment. I mean, I actually feel a little bit bad because people are generally quite impressed by my giant slime block and honey block machines. I feel like this video might actually ruin it for people when they find out that actually they're really simple. Now in this example, I was pulling all of my linked attachments, but you could push all of your linked attachments, or you could do a combination of pushing and pulling. Remember, your attachments work in exactly the same way as your motor. They just don't have to connect up to form a loop. So now that you understand motors, and now that you understand attachments, why not try building something a little bit fancy? This is my private jet. It looks rather lovely. It's got some nice details in there. We've got a super simple, super fast 2-piston motor, and then these little attachments on the side to create the wings. And we're even making use of honey blocks so that we can have the slime blocks and the honey blocks next to one another. There's not many air gaps. Now, when playing with combinations of honey blocks and slime blocks, it can be tempting to create really, really compact flying machines like this motor right here. This should work, right? We've got slime blocks on one side, honey blocks on the other side. They're not going to stick to one another. We've got ourselves a loop, but if I activate it, you can see it doesn't really actually go very far, and that is because the slime blocks still stick to the components on the other side. So yes, the slime blocks and the honey blocks won't stick to one another, but if a slime block ends up next to a piston, it will still stick to it, and your block push on it will be surpassed very quickly. So definitely watch out for that when dabbling with slime block and honey block combined machines. So that is all of our basics covered. Now it is time to move on to some of the slightly more advanced bits and pieces. First things first, making solid looking structures. Now this right here is essentially a regular linked attachment chain. We looked at one of these a little bit earlier on, but it's a little bit smarter, and when put next to one another, creates a solid wall of blocks, which always looks really cool inside of moving machines. We're using strips of slime blocks and honey blocks next to one another in segments, and those segment splits are being hidden by the fact that although these blocks here are not stuck to anything, they're not attached to slime blocks or honey blocks like these ones are, they will be pulled along by the blocks that are attached to the slime blocks and the honey blocks. This is an important thing to remember, and it's a very useful tool to have in your toolbox. You actually might have noticed something similar a little bit earlier on. You see this slime block right here actually isn't sticking to this observer. In fact, it is not sticking to this whole segment right here, but it is going to push this slab along, which is then going to push this slime block along, which is then going to push all of this stuff along. And when you use that to your advantage, you can end up with some really nice, solid, chunky looking builds. Now another thing that you'll see in a lot of large machines is diagonal lines, and that is because you can attach your decorative blocks to two sides of your sticky blocks. When you think about it, even these modules here are just diagonal lines that you stack up next to one another to create a sort of flat area. So this is an example of a diagonal wall that moves forward, but you could move your diagonal walls sideways or pull them backwards if you want to. They're just useful to have in your build. Just remember, when it comes to your walls, it's much easier to do diagonals than it is to do flat walls on giant moving machines. Flat walls are possible though, they just require a little bit more prep. So you can see here we have our motor, and then that's going into this little attachment here, which is then going into this attachment, which is then going into all of these attachments. All of these separate segments. Now as you can see on the back of all of these segments, I've actually got a little setup where we have observers running into pistons that are pushing this big structure along. Now it's important to note that there are no air gaps on the inside of this structure. If there was, as soon as this started moving, the whole structure would compress in on itself. You need to make sure that there is no air present. But the beauty of a setup like this is each one of these individual pistons can push 12 blocks in a line. Because there are no slime blocks or honey blocks in this part of the build, we're no longer dealing in segments and stuck together clusters. It's just good old-fashioned linear straight line 12 blocks. So if you wanted to make, say, a walking house or a moving diamond pile, this is how I would recommend you do it. You've got your motor, and then that attaches into a pusher, which attaches into an even bigger pair of pusher attachments, which then goes into all of these pusher attachments, which then push this thing along. Nice. Well, you may have heard me mention a walking house just a second ago. Well, I've shown you how to do the house part, but what about the walking part? Let's take a look at some legs. Now, I will admit, legs are a tiny bit complicated because there's a few things that have to happen. The leg needs to come up, and then it needs to move across, and then it needs to be able to go back down again. There's multiple directions of movement going on there, which is a little bit more complicated than anything that we've looked at so far. Until you think of it as a motor that gets assembled when the leg gets pulled up, and then a motor that gets disassembled when the leg gets put down. That then makes things a little bit easier. So here we have our really simple leg. If I remove this redstone block, you can see our leg goes up, move the crossbar block, and then goes back down. But what happens if I increase the spacing between our redstone blocks? Well, then you'll see that actually all it is a regular flying machine that only gets activated when the leg gets pulled up, and then it gets switched off when everything goes back down. And if I remove the redstone block entirely, well, now you can really see what's going on here. We have our simplest version of the flying machine, a push and pull 2-piston loop going on. So this is my little leg design, which I use all the time, but I would highly recommend you go away and try and design a leg for yourself using exactly the same principles. And once you've designed your leg, hook it up to a little motor and watch it hop along off into the distance. That's actually quite lovely to watch. But I think that brings me quite nicely onto walking sequences. If I walk forward and look down, I may notice I don't have any legs. If I switch into F5, however, I can see that one leg kind of travels past the other. I don't shuffle along like this. That would be a weird way to get around. Instead, each leg swings by. Now, to get that sort of walking sequence inside of a machine, we need to alternate each leg moving forwards 2 blocks at a time. So this one will move forward 2 blocks, overtaking the other leg, and then it will stay put while the other leg moves forward 2 blocks, and they'll switch places as they go. And we do that making use of these little circuits right here. And they're actually quite funny little circuits. You see, when I hit this button here, I'm sure most of you can guess that these slime blocks are going to be pushed along like this, and the pistons are going to come with it. What happens next might be a bit of a surprise. I mean, how did that piston get there? Surely it was stuck to this slime. How's it ended up in this position? Well, if we do it again, you can see that this piston gets powered and it pushes the slime blocks and the redstone blocks along. But this piston is also stuck to those slime blocks as well. So it also gets pushed along like this. And then when it lands there, it also gets powered by this redstone block, which means it then pushes the slime blocks and the redstone blocks along, meaning that we essentially have a double piston extender. So if we inspect this build quickly, down at the bottom here we've got our legs. We all understand legs now. And then up at the top here we've got our double piston extenders, and our legs are ever so slightly staggered. This leg is 1 block further forward than this one. Now if I simulate our motor pushing this line of pistons forward, you can see that that double piston extender will fire, and then these pistons have been brought forward 1 block, which means on the next push, this double piston extender is going to fire. So we are alternating moving forward 2 blocks at a time, which, if I hook everything up to a motor, leads to a really nice walking sequence that actually looks fairly natural and cheery. This looks really cheery. That is the happiest little walkabout I think I've ever seen in my entire life. But even though it's cheery, the legs are quite small. What if I want to make a bigger leg? Well, you should have learned from attachments by now that if you want to build a bigger leg, you just build 2 legs and then attach them together. No one's going to watch my slime block videos anymore, are they? Because everyone's just going to be building their own awesome robots. As we can see here, if we move our redstone block along, the top segment moves, which then moves the redstone block out the way of this piston, which then it just does the same thing as a regular leg. It's just 2 legs stacked on top of one another. Now I will say, the way that you have to power the top piston of the second leg is a little bit different, because if we move the redstone block up and then across, we'll run into all sorts of issues with bud powering. So instead we start bud powered, move it up, and then update it with this block here. But for all intents and purposes, we just have 2 legs on top of one another. But surely a leg this big and this fancy is something else. Surely you've done something different here. I'll look a little closer. Peer a little bit closer into the mechanism, and you may realize that this is in fact just 3 legs on top of one another, put next to one another. This is 4 sets of 3 legs put next to one another, with 2 legs on top of one another on each side, and then another 4 sets of 3 legs on top of one another to make up the other edge of the leg. And then they've all been just orientated so it looks like one big leg. It's just a bunch of legs made to look like one leg. So now it's time to admire my armadillo. I'll be honest, I just really wanted to build an armadillo. I really wanted to build an armadillo, but that's a really stupid idea for a whole dedicated video. I built a massive armadillo in Minecraft. So I built the giant armadillo and then did everything else for this video to justify me building this giant armadillo. Look at it. Look at his cute little face. His little teeth on the front there. I mean, it's great. I think this thing's fantastic. But before I activate it, let's take a look at all the various different things. So firstly, we've got our motor in the middle here. All of you should recognize this. It's a simple little thing. Now, when it comes to large moving machines, it's important to think about how fast your machine should actually be moving. As we saw earlier on with the short little legs, they looked very cheery and very happy, but realistically that probably needed a slightly slower motor so that the ratio of on the ground time and up in the air time of the legs was correct. So this motor is quite a big and slow one. Up at the top here we can see a variety of attachments being chained off of the original motor sequence. There's a mix of pushes and pulls going on. The top segment of the shell makes use of this setup over here that we saw earlier on. The legs are just a bunch of legs stacked up next to one another and on top of one another, and that really is all there is to it. I know it's a big and it is a complicated machine, but it's made up of a bunch of incredibly simple principles. So that's enough talking. Let's kick this thing into life and take a look at it walking across the landscape. And I think we can all agree this thing's very satisfying to watch. I mean, those legs have the coolest sequence. Just watching all of the segments move separately is really cool. I'm super pleased with this thing. I really do hope that you got a lot of information out of this video. I really enjoyed making it. I enjoyed sharing the process of how these machines come together. Hopefully you have a little bit more understanding of how they actually function, which means hopefully even if you're not building them for yourselves, you now have an appreciation of how these things actually work. You can look at a build like this and actually spot various different elements that perhaps you weren't aware of before. I really do hope that you enjoyed, and I will catch you all in the next video. See ya!
About a month ago, I made two very bad decisions back to back.
Hello everyone, my name is Illyrio and welcome to the second video on the Chronos server. Today we will be working on the Lazy Raid farm. This is a big project that has been started long before I joined the server, but there is still a lot of work to do. Like in the last video, most of this project has been recorded 3 months ago, but has been finished just recently. And just before we start, I want to thank all of you for the support on the last video, which was pretty much amazing. For reference, the Lazy Raid farm is at 5,000 blocks from the Nether hub, and again the piston bot is not done yet, so we'll have to use the Elycraft. So I arrived at the Nether side of the Lazy Raid farm, but first I want to show you the overworld side. And this is how it looks like on the overworld side. And this part is actually already done. So we have a floor pattern and another pattern on the wall, and also the farm in the middle, which is not rendered yet. This perimeter is actually 1000 by 1000 blocks, as you can see. So it's kind of hard to see everything in survival. So I will show you some shots of it using the replay mod. You may recognize this farm. This is the first version of the Lazy Raid farm, and yeah, this is a bit outdated now, but we still want to finish the project, so that's why we are working on this now. And there is already a video explaining how this farm works on YouTube, so I will link it in the description. But basically this is really fast, really annoying to build, and you don't want to build this. Now let's talk about the decoration. So first the floor. This pattern here was designed by Bohm and it's 64 by 64 blocks. And this was entirely made by machine. So we used the 4GameTick encoded floor placer by Floppy to build the floor for this entire perimeter. The construction of the walls was also automated. As you can see, we have a sort of gradient here between different colors, and this was made using a machine. And the machine is on this side here. I decided to go in creative to explain you how this machine works, because it's not really complicated. So for this example, we will make a gradient between red to orange and then to yellow. The machine uses 15 different shulker boxes with 15 different signal strengths. And we are shuffling those shulker boxes in the system here. Every time we dispense a box, we read the signal strength, and then depending on the signal strength, we will choose which block to place. In the beginning, we will have a signal strength of 15 on the side, which means that no matter how full the box is, it will always output 0, which means that this will always output 1. So when this is 1, we will choose the red concrete. And then after some time, we will decrease the signal strength here to 14, which means it will still be 0 here for the boxes between 1 and 14, but for a box that have a signal strength of 15, it will output 1, because 15 minus 14 is 1, which means here we'll output 0, and then it will select the orange. So there is a 1 in 15 chance that it will select the orange concrete. Then after some time it will decrease to 13. So now it will output 2 for a signal strength of 15, but this will still be 0. And it will also be 0 for a signal strength of 14. So now there is 2 in 15 chance that it will select the orange concrete. Then the signal strength on the side will continue to decrease. Around 8 it will be half red and half orange, and it will decrease to 1 when there will be almost no red concrete, and then it will go back up to 15, and at 15 we'll only have the orange concrete, and then it will start doing the same thing with the yellow. So it will always do a gradient between 2 colors, and we will never have the 3 colors at the same time. So this is basically how the machine works. The rest is pretty much a counter, so you can choose after how long you want the signal strength here to decrease to change the color, and also some precise timings. If I go back on the SMP, here we have the thing to shuffle the boxes. We then read the contents and we have the signal strength on the side, and it's linked to a red coder with the storage in all the different colors. And on this side we have 2 counters, one for the height of the walls and another one to determine when we want to start the gradient and when we want to change the signal strength on the side here. And the rest is pretty much all the logics. And we also need to make sure the system is 6GameTick compatible, this way it doesn't take too long to run. And by the way, the first prototype of this machine was made by Arnott, and then Hunter, Nurse and Divided made the final one. I'm back on the Nether because that's where we need to make some progress. We already have a perimeter, which is around 600 by 800 blocks, and now we're trying to break some bedrock. And we are actually at the last layer here. So this is the 4th layer, which is close to be finished, and now we need to start the last one. And as you can see, we are not using the lossless breaker here, because this project was started 8 months ago, and at this point the lossless breaker was not done yet. But I think at this time only the first layer was broken, and we started to break the other one just last week. Now I will build this piston placer, so it's a good opportunity for some time lapses. Okay, so the piston placer has been built and it's currently running, and we also built some bedrock breakers. We currently have 2 running, this one and this one, and I just built a third one which I will launch right now. So I just have to remove this redstone block. And now it's running. So as you can see, it removes all the bedrock that's in the way. And at this rate we are breaking 1 layer every 2 days approximately. And for that we are using 2 different piston placers. We have one here, and we also built one in the middle which is close to the end right now. And we are using in total 6 bedrock breakers per layer. So we have one station to unload the piston here. So above the station we have a simple 2x unloader here, which unload a piston every 4 game ticks. Then we patch the pistons, and then we dispense them on the ice line correctly aligned. And then here we have some modules to push the pistons every few blocks. You can see it in action here. And we also have other features. Here we have a system to detect when the placer arrived, so it can stop the clock and we don't lose any pistons. And we are using the same ice line for every layers. So we just have to change the station of the placer here, and this way we don't have to rebuild it every time. And we have the exact same station in the middle of the perimeter, just right here. And we can check the progress on the map. It's really close to being done right now. It should be done, I think, tomorrow night. And then we can start decorating this perimeter. So it's been 3 days since the last clip, and the roof has been removed entirely now. So now we can start on decorating the floor of this perimeter. And for that we'll use an encoded floor placer, so the same machine that we use for the overworld side. And we also want to make a pattern that is really similar to the one on the overworld. And I was not able to play it the last 2 days, but the other members already built this machine, so we can check it out. It's on the other side of this perimeter. So the machine consists of different parts. We have a floor placer on this side, and this is also part of the floor placer, I think. And we have the encoded part. So this here is the encoded part. So we stored the pattern that we want to make in those shulker boxes, and each colored shulker has a different signal strength and represent a different block in the pattern. And that's what we use to make sure the blocks are placed in the correct order to create the pattern that we want. Here we have the storage for all the different items, and we can use at max 15 different items. And then on this side the player is placing all the blocks, so we can check. As you can see, it's really nice to watch all the different blocks, and then it moves on this part, and here we have the floor placer. So it was just started a few minutes ago. I think it's working correctly, but we'll have to wait for a few layers to make sure the pattern looks correct. Right now it's kind of hard to tell. And if you want to know more about this system, I will link the video by Floppy in the description, where he explains everything to know about this system. So I think now it's time for a time lapse. I have my second account loaded, so let's see how this looks. And we are back with the floor completely built. And I've got to say, this looks really nice. I really love this pattern, especially the colors. And we have actually 2 layers of pattern and a third one if we count the glass to spawn-proof it. So this is why it looks really great. We can have a lot more details if we have 2 layers. And now the next part of the decoration is to build the walls. And we will use the same machine that we used on the overwall side to make gradient. And since you already know how this machine works, I guess let's just see it in action. Now that the farm is fully decorated, the last thing to do is to bring a skeleton. We need the arrow of a skeleton to ignite the TNT, which will then kill the raiders. And we use skeleton arrows instead of the players, so this way we don't get the player drops, like the crossbow and axes. And we only get the important drops, like the redstone dots for example. And it also means that we don't get any emeralds, but we don't really care about that. To get a skeleton, I found a skeleton spawner close to the farm. This way I don't have to turn off the mob switch. From there it was pretty easy to transport it, using a bubble column and rails. So first I have to catch it. Then I need to make a big rail line from the spawner to the farm, in the overworld and in the nether. And then I just need to transport it inside the nether portal and then to the farm. Now that the skeleton is in place, I just needed to shoot an arrow, then align the arrow by pushing it down, and now I can call this project done. Well, almost. You see, there was a TNT that was not supposed to be there, so when I pushed the arrow down, it ignited the TNT and exploded the farm. So we loaded a backup and did it again. And this time I got help by Bread to make sure I didn't blow up the farm again. With the arrow in place, we just need to give a looting sword to the skeleton so we can get the looting effect when we kill the raiders. Since the beginning of the video, the other members have been grinding the piston bolts and now they are all done. Which means we can take the piston bolts to go from the nether hub to the lazy raid farm, and it takes around 4.5 minutes. It's pretty useful, but at the same time it's pretty much the last time we will come here, except for the tour. Because as I said in the beginning of the video, we have better farms now, like the ultimate raid farm, which is less laggy and faster, but we still wanted to finish this project, which is what we have done. Overall, I really like how the decoration of the nether side turned out, especially considering it has been completely automated, the walls and the floor. And I forgot to say that in the last video with the blaze farm perimeter, but we filled the gap between the decoration and the normal terrain with bedrock, so it looks better. And speaking of tour, we'll be doing the 117 tour on the 17th of December. So if you want to see it live, Joe will be streaming the tour. I will leave his Twitch channel in the description, and I will also make multiple videos about the tour, the first one releasing next week. So that will be all for this video. I hope you liked it, and I will see you later for another one. Bye!
About a month ago, I made 2 very bad decisions back to back. First, I went swimming with my cell phone, and then second, I tasked you guys with picking a replacement for me. Right out of the gate, the winner was clear, and I got to work migrating my life to the Fairphone 5, which, hey! Oh, Reddit. What did you do? The LG Wing?
You got me, guys. But for better or for worse, I'm a man of my word, so I really have been daily driving this thing for the last month. And there are a lot of things I hate about it, you absolute trolls. However, unexpectedly, there were some things I genuinely liked, even if none of them had to do with the unique screen layout or to do with our sponsor.
Just like that? Oh, it's wrong again.
Don't be a dentist. Build Redux offers all kinds of pre-built PCs that'll fit your needs. Pick your top 3 games and your budget. The pre-built PC will be shipped right to your door. Check out Build Redux at the link below.
How do you even begin with this thing? Have you ever found yourself wishing that you had a selfie stick that was about 3 inches long and permanently attached to your phone? Well, congratulations! You just invented the LG Wing. I think it's fair to say that calling the secondary screen kinda useless would be an act of generosity on par with declaring Jibo to be the invention of the year. For real. The best thing that I can say about the swivel screen feature is that it was relatively easy to ignore. Or at least it would have if the phone it was attached to wasn't so all around bad. But we'll get back to that in a bit because things actually started out pretty okay. The first legit use I found for the Wing form factor was watching TV on the top screen while scrolling the news on the bottom. A real-world 50% increase in usable screen real estate. Unfortunately, that only kept me entertained for about 10-15 minutes before I realized, wait, I don't like reading in old CRT TV form factor. I want to go back to portrait and just use picture-in-picture like I always have. One thing I didn't get sick of, though, was using the Wing to show my phone to other people. This is objectively much easier than this. Or at least it is until you want to try to change the volume. Back here? Really? Oh, another good thing, though, it fits nicely in a cup holder. Okay, but seriously, though, I was surprised by how much thought LG clearly put into developing not just the hardware, but even the software that could take advantage of it. Like, look at this. The first time you deploy the screen, you'll be greeted with a tutorial that explains all the different cool ways that you can use it. Bookmarking your favorite landscape apps to the swivel menu, configuring them to utilize the second screen in a variety of ways, including opening 2 apps at the same time, more on that later, or even expanding individual apps to the second screen, which is objectively super cool. Or I don't know, at least it would be if the experience wasn't comically bad just about every time I tried to use it. To be clear, LG's own apps can be an okay experience. The camera app, for example, has this gimbal mode that mimics the experience of using a camera on a motorized stabilizer mount. Pretty neat, right? I mean, in practice, the resulting video is pretty low resolution since LG is using digital zoom to enable their software stabilization, but it definitely achieves a different look and feel compared to a typical phone camera, and it's got a built-in handle. The problem is that third-party apps, even some of the ones that were included in the swivel menu by default, struggle to make use of the Wing's unique screen layout. YouTube, for instance, is obviously designed to run in portrait. I mean, look at all this blank space while you're browsing content in landscape. And no effort has been made to move secondary elements, like comments, for example, to the bottom screen. And that's far from the worst of it. Check out what happens when I try to go back from a full screen video with my swiping from the side navigation gesture. Hello? Absolutely hilarious. Maps is fine though, at least until you go to search for a destination. Ergonomic. And it gets even worse. After struggling to think of any other app that might benefit from launching in landscape mode all the time, I settled on TeamViewer, only to quickly realize that LG's warning about unpredictable behavior on non-optimized apps, if you remember that, all of them, was well justified. My fingerprint wouldn't read, more on that later, and I couldn't find any way to get the pin pad to open, locking me out of the app completely. But Linus, what about the 2 separate apps though? Actually, this one felt a lot more practical to me. I mean, who can hate having extra screen real estate? Now, obviously, it's not the same as a foldable, where you can just seamlessly expand your working space. But there were times that I was extremely grateful to have the inner screen. Like, okay, you know how it's gone out of fashion to let you copy part of the text in a messaging app? Well, with the Wing, if someone sent me a phone number or a street address, for example, I could just throw their message up on one screen and then transcribe it directly into my Maps app on the other. Unfortunately, that's about it. Or, okay, not quite. There's this bottom screen trackpad mode, and you can have a mouse cursor on the top. That's pretty cool, coming back to remote desktops, but I'd say any improvement in productivity from that is probably offset by the fact that the keyboard doesn't automatically open on the bottom screen, but rather opens like this, giving you a teeny tiny little space to work with. Speaking of automatically, Android Auto didn't work at all for me. The prompt to connect would come up, but then the Wing would just sit there and buzz ineffectually until it got bored. And I tried everything, rebooting the phone, rebooting the car, a different cable, forcing the uninstallation of the updates, and then reapplying them. I finally gave up, and then 3 days later, it randomly popped up a message when I plugged it into my car just to charge, and it's worked flawlessly ever since. I have no explanation for that other than, I don't know, maybe it got an update. But for real though, I was pleasantly surprised to find that the Wing is not only running Android 13, but is still getting pretty regular patches. I got 2 while I was using it. Now you might remember that LG got out of the phone game way back in 2021, but they promised Wing owners at least 3 OS upgrades plus patches, and they seem to be keeping their word. The OS was generally pretty responsive, and I didn't encounter any unexpected compatibility issues, even when using apps on the Wing display. If it works in landscape, it works on the Wing. They also took a really cool approach to carrier and manufacturer bloatware. As part of the
Chris
setup process,
Chandabes.
you just
Hello sir, how's your day?
And now we get to the bathroom. So what you want to do, the red line, not red line, so bathroom because that's what you use it for. So you get your Western.
opt out of anything that you don't want.
You crack the lid. Do we have any butter? I feel like we might have lost it.
Good butter already open, man.
Well, I just asked you. You give me a silly response. You don't know what I asked. Western Star butter, and we have plenty. So, therefore, this one will stay stored in the fridge till we need to use the power. Look at this beautiful, guys. So, we're gonna do stuff to keep what we are doing. Mitch.
Yeah.
What is your favorite meal of all time?
I don't know, man.
Can you say no?
I don't know, man.
Subway cookies, obviously.
That's true. Everyone think of that.
Wait, what's your favorite?
You know what we're gonna tell me, Mitch?
I don't know.
What kind of, it's not, I don't know any of that. It's just like, oh, you know, chicken stir fry or
Yeah, pizza.
pizza margarita.
Yeah, man.
From which store?
I don't know, man. I like the rice gun.
Butter chicken, maybe.
I think you like pie.
Butter chicken? Butter chicken is amazing. I just don't like spicy curry. Butter chicken with some pop, with some naan bread. And
Chris Chandabes. And how's your stream going, sir?
Yeah, I don't really like heavy like
No, I just didn't like the spot.
Yeah, because when we got Indian that one time, it was like spicy.
And I was sweating my balls off.
Yeah.
Do you like it?
Nah.
Would you eat a ghost pepper for $100?
I don't know, man. Would you?
Chris Chandabes. Can I ask you one question, sir?
Sure, as long as you're not trying to sell me something.
I would eat it for $500. Other than that, no. Ghost pepper hurt very bad on the throat. You drink milk, nothing else. It's just constant pain. And then 8 hours later, just sitting on that toilet saying, "Oh my God, why did have 2 burgers. We are having potato gens with corn on the side. Mitch,
Yeah.
1 or 2 burger.
Oh, just one name. Yeah.
Dad, will you just have 1 burger or 2? Yeah. Everyone is sorted. Cooper?
I'll have a couple.
Okay.
I'll have a couple.
Sounds good.
Instead of having to go hunt them down and neutralize them in the app tray later. And this is an approach I would love to see adopted by phone makers that still exist. Raising the question, if they can ship up-to-date software, why don't they still exist? Well, see, the thing is, updated software doesn't mean good software. There wasn't a quick access icon in the shade for the hotspot feature, so you gotta dig through the menu like a pleb if you wanna share your connection. The phone app is super overzealous and turns the screen off the instant you start a call, regardless of the state of the proximity sensor. So if you need to punch in an extension or mash 0 trying to get to a human in a phone tree, you need to convince the wing to turn the screen back on and allow your input, which, by the way, was a serious problem with the device the entire time I had it. I don't know if we're gonna be able to capture this in B-roll, but it felt like a solid 25% of the time I wanted to wake the device, I had to press the bloody button 2 or 3 times to get it to actually accept a fingerprint input. See, yeah, I did it this time. Of course it does, the second I turn on the camera. Sorting your apps in the drawer also feels a little broken. You can just sort them alphabetically like on any other phone, but then anything installed afterward is going to be just plonked onto the end out of order until you manually resort them again. Genius. Speaking of apps, while the software that comes on the phone works pretty well on this unique aspect ratio, anything else that you download is going to be pretty hit or miss. Some apps just don't size well to the smaller screen, and most of them have no native multi-screen support. Uninstalling apps also had its snags, though it's hard to tell if this is an LG thing or just a not Samsung thing. When I delete an app from the app drawer, I just get unceremoniously dumped back to the home screen. Every single time. I can see how if you're removing just one app, that's probably fine, but if you're like me and you only periodically clean up the unneeded apps from your phone, it can get kind of annoying after the 3rd or 4th time that you're reopening the app drawer and going back to where it is that you want to be. So good job Samsung, I guess, and do better everyone else, especially LG. My biggest issue with the Wing software was the overnight restarts. It happened about 3 times during my month that the phone would just randomly reboot in the middle of the night, which shouldn't be a big deal. I mean, lots of phones reboot in the night to install updates and stuff like that. Except that on the Wing, my notifications would just stop working until I unlocked the phone again in the morning, at which time all my notifications would come flooding in, which caused me to miss a couple of morning meetings. But that's probably enough time spent beating up the software, given that I need to save some time to talk the hardware too. Like most folding phones, the Wing is heavy, and I mean, I get it. You gotta have enough structure in there to keep not 1, but 2 screens rigid, but then with all that work you put into it, how does it end up feeling so loose? I mean, seriously, guys, we went out of our way to get our hands on a brand new device in order to ensure that the hinge wouldn't just be busted from the previous owner. After just a month on this thing, typing with the phone closed causes a noticeable rattling under your fingers, and even just holding the thing causes the front screen to shift a little bit under your fingers, and not just the way it's supposed to swing, but the other way too. Almost makes me want to just get in there with an LTT screwdriver and tighten things up. LTTstore.com. Oh, and don't get me started on the fingerprint sensor. This might be the worst fingerprint sensor that I have ever encountered. It's working fine right now because of course it is. I'm trying to show you guys something. But your fingers need to be exactly the same level of clean and moisturized that you were when you first set it up, And you've got to get the location, and I found even the pressure sometimes just right. Like seriously, it worked to unlock this phone maybe 50% of the time for me. And that includes 5 attempts. Like I would often have to enter the pin. And if you flip out the wing display, well, that just ramps the difficulty up to hard mode, since it especially seemed to struggle when you tried to use it in a different orientation than your original scan. It also reveals another problem. The design of this phone, even if it was practical, captures a ton of dust on the inner screen here, and then on the back of the upper screen, especially here where the earpiece is. That crud then scratches the crap out of these slides around the edges of the upper screen and on the bezels of the lower screen. And even though this phone was new out of box when we got it, after just a month, not only do we have scratches on there, but even a few that are starting to form right here on the bottom screen. That is pretty brutal. And while we've got it flipped over, by the way, now seems like a good time to check out the physical buttons. Using these with the screen open is basically impossible, especially if you have thicker fingers. And to top it all off, the thing isn't even fidget friendly. I mean, you can open it one-handed, but closing it again, it's a bit of a challenge, especially if you have smaller hands. Like, look, I can do it, but boy, is that ever a risky maneuver. The thing is, if the Wing was an otherwise great phone with this gimmick, I wouldn't even be complaining. But using it for this last month has just been a nightmare. It is full of compromises, even compared to my older Samsung Note 9. It's got a weak mono speaker, no headphone jack, this weird ripple effect on the screen that's especially noticeable on light backgrounds, and while they've carved out enough space for 3 rear-facing cameras, they're all wide angle? What is up with that? The pop-up front-facing camera is kind of nifty, but it's also one of the most reported trouble points with the device, which feels like an especially unnecessary cell phone when they could have just, I don't know, kept the front camera behind the swiveling screen alongside the earpiece speaker. Which, okay, that's actually not a great solution. Not everyone wants to take a selfie with the screen and landscape like this, but it does highlight an interesting design compromise that was made to accommodate the sliding screen. Look how thin that front screen is. That is crazy. There is no room to put camera in there or even a speaker. So what they did was they put the speaker here and then they just stabbed a hole in the front screen and did the engineering equivalent of cupping their hand on it. Absolute genius. At least the battery life was okay. Not great, just okay, which I guess is gonna have to pass as a high note to leave the video off on. I'm honestly just happy the month is over and I can finally move on to my pick, the Fairphone 5. And you guys can finally move on with the segue to our sponsor.
Dennis, where's your PC? It's not even starting soon. Any more time. What did I do? Help me! You Build Redux. All you have to do is select the top 3 games you play and pick your budget. They'll show you the best setup that fits your needs. With their mouth-dropping pricing and a 2-year warranty, save yourself the hassle building a PC. There you go. More gaming, less crying. Build Redux.
If you guys like this, why not check out the 10 reasons that I'm a big fan of foldable phones, even if I'm not a big fan of ones that fold like this. That's not really foldable.
Hey guys, today we're watching Emperor's New Groove. And if you guys want us to watch Kronk's New Groove, get this video to 20,000 likes.
And comment down below other Disney movies we should watch, and subscribe to be updated and never miss a video.
Alright, y'all click the bell.
Well, you'll never believe this, but that llama you're looking at was once a human being.
Guys, is Kuzco voiced by David Spade? Is this gonna ruin the film for me?
Ruin or save?
Oh my god, it was David Spade. No f***ing way.
I remember watching this movie and I feel like the movie's fine, but I feel like I enjoyed.
So this guy, let's call him Big Boy. Now, Big Boy's a young dude, and things aren't going well for him. His parents aren't really good parents, he's flunking in and out of school, he's bouncing around from foster home to foster home. But here's the thing about Big Boy. He's a big boy. By the time he's 16, he's 6'5" and 350 pounds. So he's able to get into a private school because he's good at a bunch of sports, which is great for him, but he's still kind of bouncing around from couch surfing with his friends to being homeless. But then, one day, everything changes. He meets this man at the gym him, Sean. Now, Sean befriends Big Boy and he lets him stay at his house for the weekend. And there he has a wife, Leanne, and a couple of kids. So Sean, Leanne, and the family, they end up liking Big Boy a lot. And then a few years go by and they sign paperwork and become his legal guardians. And they start referring to him as their adopted son. Then, now that Big Boy's out of poverty, he becomes a rock star at high school football, then college football, and eventually he gets drafted to the NFL. And there's Sean and Leanne standing right next to him at the draft. Then, because Big Boy's life story is so compelling, they write a book about it. That book later gets made into a movie called The Blind Side, and Sandra Bullock stars in it playing Leanne, and she wins an Oscar, and the movie wins a bunch of awards. This whole thing feels like a fairy tale for Big Boy. Until years go by and Big Boy is now a grown adult. But one day, he starts to realize he didn't make a lot of money from all that. So who had helped him with that movie deal? Well, he was a teenager, so Sean and Leanne did. So Big Boy gets a lawyer to look over all this legal paperwork, and it turns out Sean and Leanne's legal guardianship that they signed into place all those years ago, actually a conservatorship. You know, that thing Britney Spears just got out of? Oh, and it gets worse. After all these years, it's still in place. He's 37 now and has 4 kids. So Big Boy is devastated. All this time, he thought he was a legal member of their family, and it turns out he's not. And most importantly, he believes Sean and Leanne duped him out of all that blindside money. So he files a petition with the court and accuses them of using his name to make millions of dollars for themselves. So they go through the process, and eventually a judge does rule to end the conservatorship, and basically says she's surprised it was ever put in place. And of course now, Big Boy is suing Sean and Leanne for his cut of the blindside money. Now keep in mind, this whole story I just told you is from Big Boy's perspective. Now, Sean and Leanne, they have a different perspective. They basically say they have no problem ending the conservatorship, and that Big Boy didn't get paid very much from the blind side because none of them got paid very much. I guess they're saying Hollywood ripped them all off, and that is where the lawsuit stands as of now. And this all happened in Tennessee, so shout out to Tennessee.
I disagree to talk rather than just us like feeding all of disinformation and stuff.
Hey guys, today we're watching Emperor's New Groove. And if you guys want us to watch Kronk's New Groove, get this video to 20,000 likes.
And comment down below other Disney movies we should watch, and subscribe to be updated and never miss a video.
Alright, I'll click the bell.
Well, you'll never believe this, but that llama you're looking at was once a human being.
Guys, is Kuzco voiced by David Spade? Is this gonna ruin the film for me?
Ruin or save?
Oh my god, it was David Spade. No f***ing way.
There are kings and catty tyrants.
I remember watching this movie and I feel like the movie's fine, but I feel like I enjoyed the TV series more. Am I crazy for that?
Yes, because you were a dumb idiot child.
No, I saw the movie in Spanish a couple weeks ago, and I saw the TV show and I was like, Demon Slayer, bro.
See, you...
Hello everyone, this is your Daily Dose of Internet. This delivery guy gave zero warning about how heavy this box is.
Allison!
They really thought they could move this mattress without crushing Santa.
Go hard, go.
A student was misbehaving, so the teacher called their father on the phone, but that phone number was actually for their best friend.
I'm really appreciative if you could have a sit down with Angel and tell him what his job is as a student and not to act like a fool.
Yeah, I'll talk to him.
Okay. And he seems to be short of material.
The way he shakes off the snow is so satisfying.
Ollie, come inside. Come.
I think this is the best 1,300 bucks I've spent. Yeah, videography and
This guy really brought a weight scale to a restaurant.
She ordered an 8-ounce. I put it on the scale. Only come one side on it. 2 sides 8.5 grams. It's actually
These students spent a long time practicing for the Christmas concert.
Get back in here now.
Some guy thought it would be possible to run away from the police while also bringing his trailer home with him.
I have not really talked.
That is the end of this video. We hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Later.
To create a business rather than videography. You know, like it's a bit special because they have to draw more action.
Holy shit, thank you guys so much for 30 subscribers. But you know it would be even more goddamn sick if we could get to 3,000 subscribers by February. Eh? You know what I'm talking about? Probably not gonna fucking happen. What the fuck is wrong with me? Just, you know, I put a lot of work into my videos, editing them. The last one took 6 hours. Seriously, thank you guys for also support my latest videos and everything. I really appreciate it. Not be able to do it without you. But also 30,000 sounds pretty fucking sick.
So if I could get, I'd pay $5 grand for decent photos for sure. And I've done that in my career, you know, using other people's money. Plenty of times. I mean, yours is a, you know, a multi-million-dollar business as well, you know.
Yeah, it's the money make money, as they say.
$100 grand next year, you know, so.
Yeah,
no, it is definitely good, definitely proactive.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, give her access to TikTok. How do I give someone access to my TikTok? I have no idea.
How's it going, boys? My name is Schlatt, and welcome back to the VODs channel. Today we're playing some unpacking. This is a nice, calm little game about taking stuff out of boxes and putting it in a house. Honestly, very therapeutic. I had a good time playing with it and interacting with as it sounds, but this is pretty much just 3-4 hours of the most mind-numbing reaction content ever. A lot of these photos and videos were downright disturbing, and I genuinely had to take a breather in the middle of the stream because of how rough it was. Anyways, without further ado, here's the VOD. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my goodness. The first time you've seen my ugly mug in 2 weeks on this site. And you know what? I prefer to keep it that way. I'm like I'm like one of those people who just chimes in every now and then. You know, I'm not trying to be your addiction. You guys are going to withdrawal. The merch got there for most people. Finally, it's here, and I'm making more. We'll wait a bit. I promise. We'll wait a little bit. Schlatt drinking Drano. Drano? What are you talking about? I'm drinking blue. You know I gotta drink that blue. Come on, man. I'm not drinking Drano. I don't even know what that is.
These details are...
Well, you know what? We just tend to get through, we cut through the chit-chat on this stream because I'm not really here to be a 10-hour long career Twitch streamer. I'm here for content and content alone. So let's just get started. We know why we're here. We know why we're here. Why are we here, gentlemen? We are here because I tweeted a couple days ago saying to send in a photo of your bedroom, which honestly, if you take it, I mean, depending on which way to look at it, kind of a weird request, kind of a weird one. But hey, you know, we like to have a little fun around here, and I asked for the photos, and you guys obliged. Oh my God, the Tommy Innit music. I'm shuffling it right now. I just picked that. Either way, it is bedroom time. We are here to look at, judge, and I mean, really just judge, right? We're not doing anything with the photos. God forbid. I'm not keeping these fucking things. These go straight in the fucking recycling bin after this. But hey, you know, this is what we're doing. Hope you guys are all doing well. Hello, YouTube. Hello, VODs channel. Dude, the last one got like 1 million views on the VOD. On the VOD. Nuts. Anyways, So I got a folder full of these fucking things, and we're gonna go through them one by one. Last time it was very, very long. It was a very long stream. I'm not usually used to doing like 3-4 hour streams, but that's kind of what it became. And so maybe we'll blow through these. Maybe there'll be less. Maybe there'll be more. All I know is that there were 4,000 submissions, more than 4,000 submissions on the Google form that I sent. And I looked at none of them because I have a beautiful, fantastic mod team who spent so long looking through 4,232 submissions from the Google form without my help. They just, you know, they sorted through them. They picked the best ones. Sorry if you didn't make the cut. It's not my fault. Go send them the threats. And you know what's funny? I don't pay a single one of them. I say, you know, hey, you know, for the time, I could give you like a little U2's plushie or something. You want a plushie? They usually don't, though.
You want some corn on the cob?
Yeah, sure. Nah.
So they say no. I'd rather not have one. And here I am, just drinking blue. I don't even fucking. Yes, I do. I offer you the plush. My mods are classic. They have no idea what's going on. Listen, we're gonna get into it. I'm hopped up on blue, which means I got about an hour or two in me before I crash and burn. So let's get into it. Let's get into it, shall we? The mods have informed me that there are a lot of videos this time. I think a lot of budding filmmakers trying to make their mark on the industry. You know, trying to break in. This is their lucky break. So hey, let's see. This one comes in from Debunk a Dunk. Twitch name.
The bare mattress I sleep on is flat on the sleep.
Uh-huh.